When you think of the U.S. Navy's aircraft, the first names that come to mind are the F-14 Tomcat, the F/A-18 Hornet, or the carrier-based F-35C Lightning II. But in the late 1980s and 1990s, an unexpected aircraft roared across the skies of naval training ranges. A-1 that was never designed to land on a carrier, never wore Navy colors in combat, and yet became one of the most legendary enemy fighters ever flown by American pilots. This was the F-16N Fighting Falcon, now the Navy's own hot rod version of the U.S. Air Force's F-16. This is the story of how a handful of ultra-high-performance jets, born from the Air Force's frontline fighters, became the deadliest teachers in the Navy's skies, and why their glory, the birth of a need, fighting the invisible enemy. By the 1980s, the Cold War was at its peak. The U.S. Navy had learned from Vietnam that real combat experience was priceless, and that training against realistic opponents was the best way to prepare pilots for survival. The Navy's elite TOPGUN program, formerly known as the Navy Fighter Weapons School, had revolutionized air combat training by pitting students against instructors flying aircraft that simulated Soviet fighters like the MiG-21 and MiG-23. However, by the mid-1980s, many of the Navy's adversary aircraft were aging. The small, agile A-4 Skyhawks and the subsonic F-5E Tiger Is had served well, but they couldn't replicate the speed, power, and radar signatures of modern Soviet jets like the MiG-29 Fulcrum or Su-27 Flanker. The Navy needed a new adversary aircraft, a fast, agile, and capable of mimicking fourth-generation threats. Enter the F-16 Fighting Falcon. Why the F-16? The perfect opponent. The General Dynamics F-16 was already a proven design by the 1980s. It was lightweight, powerful, and extremely agile, a perfect platform to simulate modern enemy fighters. The Air Force's F-16A/B variants had already shown their worth in combat and training, but the Navy wanted a version tailored to their needs as an aggressor aircraft. Unlike the Air Force's multi-role F-16S that carried advanced radar and weapon systems, the Navy didn't need most of that. They wanted performance, not payload. So the Navy approached General Dynamics with a request: build a version of the F-16 specifically for dogfighting training, stripped of unnecessary combat systems but optimized for speed and maneuverability. Building the hot rod. What made the F-16N special? The result was the F-16N, a truly unique breed of fighter. At first glance, the F-16N looked identical to an early F-16A, but under the skin, it was a different beast. Here's what made it special: engine power. The F-16N was equipped with the Pratt & Whitney F-100 PW220 engine, delivering over 23,000 pounds of thrust, giving the jet an incredible thrust-to-weight ratio. Weight reduction. The aircraft carried no internal cannon, no radar-guided missiles, and had most of its combat avionics removed. This drastically reduced weight, making it even more agile. Airframe reinforcement. Because of the extreme stress of constant high-G dogfighting during training, the F-16N's structure was strengthened to handle more abuse than operational F-16s. Radar electronics. It kept a simplified version of the APG-66 radar system, mainly to simulate enemy radar behavior during training. Paint schemes. Perhaps the most iconic part of the F-16N's wore aggressor camouflage patterns inspired by Soviet and Middle Eastern designs. They sported desert browns, grays, and blues, with red stars and numbers mimicking MiG-style markings. The F-16N was, in essence, a supercharged, stripped-down racer, the muscle car of Navy fighter jets. Fast, unforgiving, and thrilling to fly. Arrival at TOPGUN, a new era of air combat training. The first F-16Ns arrived at Miramar, California, a home of the Navy's TOPGUN School, in 1987. Pilots were immediately impressed by its raw performance. In mock dogfights, the F-16N could outclimb, outturn, and out-accelerate most other U.S. Navy fighters, including the legendary F-14 Tomcat and the F/A-18 Hornet. This was precisely what the Navy wanted: a plane that could push its students to the edge, forcing them to adapt to modern air combat tactics. The F-16 Newtons quickly became the premier adversary aircraft in U.S. Navy service. It was flown by both Top Gun instructors and dedicated adversary squadrons, including VF-43 at NAS Oceana, VF-45 at NAS Key West, VF-126 at NAS Miramar, SOC, Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center, at NAS Fallon. Each of these units used the F-16 Newtons to simulate threats ranging from Soviet MiG-29s to Middle Eastern F-16s, providing fleet squadrons with the most realistic combat training available. Life at the edge. What it was like to fly the F-16 Newtons. Flying the F-16 Newtons was both a dream and a danger. It was the most agile aircraft the Navy had ever operated, capable of pulling 9Gs and turning inside nearly anything in the air. Navy pilots who flew it described the jet as pure adrenaline and a kind of machine that responded instantly to every control input, giving the pilot the feeling of wearing the airplane. However, this incredible performance came at a cost. The constant high-G dogfights and aggressive flying placed immense stress on the airframe. The F-16 Newtons wasn't built for the kind of long-term durability expected of fleet fighters. It was, as one pilot put it, a racehorse, not a workhorse. Cracks in the armor. The structural fatigue problem. By the early 1990s, trouble was brewing. The intense daily use of the F-16N pulling maximum G-forces in nearly every flight began to take a toll on their airframes. Cracks started appearing in critical structural components, especially in the wing roots and fuselage. These were not minor issues at high speeds and G-loads. Even small cracks could become catastrophic. General Dynamics and the Navy both investigated, but repairs were costly and difficult. The Navy didn't have the budget to perform extensive airframe overhauls on such a small fleet, especially since these aircraft weren't combat capable and didn't contribute directly to operational readiness. In 1994, the Navy made the tough decision to retire the entire F-16 Newtons fleet, barely 7 years after they entered service. Gone too soon. The end of the F-16 Newtons era. By 1995, the F-16Ns were withdrawn from service, replaced by less stressed adversary aircraft like the F-5E Tiger II and later, the F/A-18A/B Hornet. Many of the retired F-16Ns were placed in storage at the Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group, AMARG, in Arizona at the famous Boneyard. Some were later converted into drones or used for ground training. It was a heartbreaking end for one of the most dynamic jets ever to fly in U.S. Navy colors. The hot rod F-16 had lived fast and died young. The legacy lives on. Lessons from the F-16 Newtons. Though its service life was short, the F-16 Newtons left an enormous legacy in the world of air combat training. Realism in training. The F-16 Newtons proved that fighting against high-performance adversaries made Navy pilots far more effective. The realism it brought to exercises like Top Gun and Red Flag was unmatched at the time. Maintenance and fatigue awareness. The rapid wear on F-16Ns led to a better understanding of structural fatigue and aircraft constantly pushed to their limits. Influence on future adversary programs. The F-16 Newtons as concept inspired future efforts, including the F-16C/D adversary variants used by private contractors like Draken International and Top Aces today. In many ways, the modern private aggressor industry where civilian companies fly military-grade fighters to train U.S. forces owes its existence to the Navy's F-16 Newtons program. The return of the Falcon, F-16s in Navy service again. Decades after their retirement, the Navy once again found itself needing high-performance adversary aircraft. The F-5s and Hornets, though useful, couldn't replicate modern threats like the Su-35 or J-10. In 2021, the U.S. Navy began acquiring surplus F-16C/D Fighting Falcons from the Air Force to fill this gap. These newer models are being modified into adversary configurations, reviving the spirit of the old F-16 Newtons at this time with improved structural durability and updated systems. It's a full-circle moment. The Viper returns to Navy skies, ready to challenge a new generation of fighter pilots. The legend of the hot rod lives on. Ask any naval aviator who trained in the late 1980s or early 1990s, And you'll hear the same thing at the F-16N was something special. It wasn't just another aircraft, it was a symbol of speed, danger, and excellence. It forced pilots to sharpen their skills and pushed the boundaries of what was possible in air combat maneuvering. Even though the F-16N's service life was brief, its reputation endures as one of the most thrilling and demanding jets ever flown by the U.S. Navy. Its story is one of brilliance and brevity, a perfect example of living fast and dying young. Epilogue: The Spirit of the Sky. The F-16N's Fighting Falcon may no longer thunder across Myanmar's skies, but its spirit still echoes in every aggressive turn and high-G maneuver flown by today's Navy aviators. It reminds us that excellence often comes at a price, that the pursuit of perfection, speed, and realism sometimes burns too brightly to last. The F-16N was never meant to fight real wars, yet, in the way it trained, tested, and transformed the Navy's best pilots, it fought and won a battle of its own kind. Technical summary: F-16N's Hot Rod Viper. Feature specification: Manufacturer General Dynamics Engine Pratt Whitney F100 PW 220 thrust 23,770 lbf max speed Mach 2.05, 1,320 miles per hour. Service ceiling 50,000 plus feet, range 1,500 miles, armament none, training configuration only, role adversary, aggressor aircraft, service years 1987A 1994, operators TOPGUN, VF-43, VF-45, VF-126, NSOC. Conclusion: The F-16N was never about longevity or practicality, it was about creating the most authentic air combat training possible. It was the Ferrari of Navy fighters, a breathtakingly fast, stunningly agile, and unapologetically demanding. It lived up to its unofficial motto, "Live fast, die young." The U.S. Navy's hot rod F-16N burn bright and brief, but its legend continues to inspire every pilot who straps into a jet, looks up at the sky, and dreams of the perfect dogfight.